Hi, my name is Harrison Taylor, and this is my EDL 851 Module 13 case study. This is a case study about an elementary school teacher that had some issue in her school. Mrs. Horton, she was very highly regarded in the past, once was Teacher of the Year, and then her attitude, took a real turn for the worse when she had some things going on in her family, and it spilled over in the classroom, and students were having bad experiences. And the principal, Mrs. Wilson, in this case study, she was getting a lot of complaints from parents and about how the students were feeling in class, and then had some negative experiences with Mrs. Horton after this time. She had a was doing really well, and then had this tough year with a lot of stuff going on with her family. And then the principal was hoping the next year it would go a lot better, and then it really got worse, or kept wasn't going the direction that they wanted it to go. Um, so the problem identification analysis, things that I know is that it's an elementary school called Crestview, in a rural area, has 18 classroom teachers with support staff. So generally smaller school, really successful, higher test scores, and people like working there. Positive community, all those things. And the principal had been teaching for 13 years, and she was working on her administrative degree and stuff like that. And then she'd been an administrator for 4 years total, that this case study was over, and most of it was concentrated on the last year. And then Mrs. Horton, she's a first grade teacher. She was once Teacher of the Year, so really highly regarded and successful in her time as a teacher. She had a lot of home life, I think a divorce and family issues that kind of spilled over into work. I kind of mentioned that before. And then, so that was kind of causing issues at school. The school started a new reading program, I believe, and Ms. Horton was really against it, and she was against people that were for the program. So obviously, she wasn't part of the united front that they wanted at the school. And then also the principal and the school board were receiving calls and things from parents about, the negative things that were happening in class. And then also there was specifically a case with a parent, Mr. Stafford. He calls in because he wants his child pulled from class, and so Mrs. Wilson kind of has to deal with that and that dynamic. Okay, and then also Mrs. Wilson is holding this meeting with Mrs. Horton, Mr. Stafford, based on his daughter's experience in class. And so she wanted to have a meeting to get this out there. She didn't want to make a change with classes until they'd had a meeting. And during this meeting, Mrs. Horton got really angry, slammed down her hand on the table, and got confrontational with Mr. Stafford. It was obviously an issue, and Mrs. Wilson had to end the meeting at that time. So things I need to know: has Mrs. Wilson spoken to Mrs. Horton about the issues that have been going on? Is she actively working on improvement and a plan to do better? Is Mrs. Horton fully aware of all the complaints that have been coming in and all these negative things that the perception in the community has been? And have there been strategies offered? Has there been any plan in place other than just Mrs. Wilson dealing with the negative things coming in and just hoping it would get better? And then the problem is, the classroom environment that Ms. Horton has created, and it's been really detrimental to students. It's not a good learning environment. Students obviously don't feel safe in this environment, and it's just really a negative on the school right now. So, my proposed plan of action would be first, because of the experience with Mrs. Horton and the parent, Mr. Stafford, there would, need to be documentation, probably a formal letter in her file. That's just not acceptable, and that needs to be, shown on paper that's been dealt with. Mrs. Horton, I would want her to be on an improvement plan with clear defined steps for improvement, and so, probably increased observations and things like that, just to make sure things are starting to go hopefully in the right direction. And then ultimately, if Mrs. Horton doesn't improve, they would have to go through the steps of non-renewing her contract and making sure they're following all the district guidelines and following all the correct procedures to go about that. So ideally, Mrs. Horton, can be a valuable asset, member of the team. So hopefully get her to improve and get better. But if it doesn't work out, then, we'd have to as a school going in a different direction. So then next we want to resolve the issue to promote student success. So Mrs. Horton needs to improve the classroom climate or no longer teach at the school because, if students don't feel safe and comfortable, then they're learning, they're not going to learn as much, their academic achievement will go down and they just won't be as successful, and that just needs to be fixed. And then so obviously that's going to impede learning if that's, it's not a safe environment, and those relationships are really important. And, as an administrator, if you could get her to make a change and become a positive member, that would really help with the learning, help with this overall school environment. Parent and staff relationships would be better. She has the ability to do it. So that's, you'd want her to improve. But if she doesn't, then, the school would have to make a change. Reflecting, I know it's a really difficult situation for an administrator, especially because this teacher probably has had a lot of really positive observations and a lot of positive documentation in the past and really well respected, won awards. So it's just difficult to deal with this situation because the teachers had, done so well, which is good in the past, but now it's been a big change. And so you have to be a lot of documentation and making sure you're diligent about that. And then also, I feel for Mrs. Horton, the teacher, because of those issues in her personal life. It's tough, and people go through that stuff. And I know it's obviously more difficult if you're the person in the situation. But that stuff just really can't spill over into the classroom. It's a problem. And then some unresolved issues that we have is there any staff input with what they're seeing, maybe counselors or other teachers. Seems like most of the stuff was coming from parents and students, so it'd be helpful to have someone in building that had maybe an ear to the ground of what's going on. And then, other than this meeting, has there been a lot of, direct administration addressing the issue with Ms. Horton so she knows, what's on the table and what's taking place and, the changes that need to happen? And also unresolved, can Mrs. Horton go back to being a great teacher again? It'd be awesome to have that great resource as her at her high level that she was before. And then component one of promoting the academic success of every student. The things I would do is I need to assist teachers with providing the rigorous curriculum and the environment to have success in this curriculum. So you want teachers who know their craft and are working on it and providing professional development for them to improve. And then the environment needs to be such that students feel comfortable and that they can take risks, in the classroom and with their education to get better and improve. And, they need that rapport there to make that happen. And then also, as an administrator, to make sure to hold teachers accountable for student achievement and the environment in the classroom, to make sure that students are able to have the academic success they need. Excuse me. Okay, and then on the well-being of every student, the expectation as an administrator, I need to make sure that I would set out that it's orderly, efficient, safe classrooms that are managed well by teachers. Classroom management is, really key part of being a teacher and something that I have to model as an administrator, having a structured building and also work with teachers on that stuff. Being open to hearing the concerns of parents and students and be willing to have meetings and make changes that really need to happen, to help them and listen to them and know that they're a part of the overall school climate and community. And then also helping teachers improve as classroom managers, leaders, building relationships. That's got to be an ongoing professional development on the job and mentoring process that happens in our building. And then I would enhance instructional capacity by improving the culture and addressing situations in the building. So school culture is extremely important. As administrator, that's really high priority. That teachers are working together and they feel like school is valuable and they're pushing to reach high levels. I'd have high expectations with teachers and staff. I'd hire them to do their jobs and expect them to do them well. And they're talented people who can do it, and they need support. And we just help them continue to do better. And then also, make sure we have structure in place for teachers who are struggling to improve. So teachers as mentors, make sure that we're tying our evaluations and professional development together so that teachers can, do have a path to have success and to get better when they're struggling. This was a tough case study. Dealing with a tough teacher a teacher struggling would always be difficult, especially a teacher with a lot of experience and clout in the educational community. But it's a really important step to make sure that your school is having success and that things are going in the right direction and academic achievement is at the forefront.